go home, and these are not peaceful protests. And I want to tell everyone, particularly people who support President Trump, if you condemn looting and rioting this summer, and many of us did, you need to condemn it now. When I see the images coming out of the Capitol, people think it's appropriate and legal and funny. It's not, folks. It's none of the above. To go looting through Speaker Pelosi's office, to go screaming through the bowels of our sacred Capitol buildings. And I'm telling you, these are extremists, and in many cases, they look like anarchists rather than people who are peacefully protesting. And I think they give a bad look to the president's legacy and also the 74 million people who voted for him. That's
perhaps, but weren't they incited by the president himself? He was speaking to that group just hours ago, around 11 o'clock this morning. He was calling on Twitter for people to come out to these protests in Washington, D.C., saying they're going to be wild.
There shouldn't be violence of any kind. Destruction is not part of democracy in its purest form. There are many ways to dissent. There are many ways to disagree. There are many ways to be upset that maybe your candidate didn't prevail. Look, I was in Georgia on Sunday and Monday. I talked about the two Senate candidates, but you had a lot of people there talking about the presidential election still. And I've been in touch with the mayor's office, Mayor Bowser. I'm glad that the president has authorized the National Guard to go. I think that's very helpful. I know that she's got a curfew going on. That will be helpful. But this is a moment for all of us to come together. And, George, I have to tell you, I hope these calls for unity are real. And I've thrown my hat into that ring as well. This, as I said about 4 years ago, that we are a country where the peaceful transition of power is incredibly important, and it's owed to each and every one of us as Americans. And I absolutely expect and hope that will take place. I'd also just like to say that when the president tells people go home and go in peace, he is directing them to leave the Capitol building now, and they ought to do it.
And we do have the video right now. So, Kellyanne, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate that. Let's show the President of the United States.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Well, the president did say go home there, but his message was wrapped in a lie. I want to bring in Chris Christie for more on that. He said the election was stolen. He said he won in a landslide. He said they're trying to take it away from you. You know that's not true. You've said it's not true. I guess this is a beginning for at least for him to say to go home. Apparently we lost Chris Christie. I'll bring that to Terry Moran.
Well, it's a half a loaf at best. Well, one of the things that President Trump insists upon is that he not ever be considered a loser. And I think this, in some ways, is gasoline on the fire. And in some ways, he may have lost control of these people. I remember I was at the rally where the crowd chanted, send her back, about Ilhan Omar. And it seemed to me as if it was a moment when the crowd took that energy out from Trump himself, and they were in control. It's possible this mob is in control. This Trumpist mob is now in control, and he can't call them back. But that was a half-hearted effort at best.
At best. Again, he did repeat that the election was stolen, repeated that falsehood that the election was stolen. Sarah Fagan, it does appear, though, that you're starting to see more Republicans speak out more strongly about what they're seeing at this point, about what the president has done. We just heard Kevin McCarthy right there condemn the violence in clear terms as well, even though he disconnected it from any objections to the election. And he's right. You can have disagreements without it going into violence. For what we heard from the president enough right now, do you expect more Republicans to speak out?
I think it was not enough. I think we will hear more Republicans speak out, and I won't be surprised if Republicans condemn his statement. I actually think it wasn't enough in two regards. This was not the time to relitigate the election. He's made his views very clear. Everybody knows them. This is about diffusing a very difficult situation, and he, I don't think, did that. And he also should have done it on camera, and he should have done it live, in my view.
Thank you, sir.
This is a very serious moment for the country.
Yeah, we'll see if he does come out with more to say. I want to go to Martha Raddatz. Thank you, Sarah. Martha, you're getting some real-time reaction from Trump supporters who've been able to seize the video, I take it, on their phones.
Real time, exactly. I told them what the president said. They said, and as we said earlier, they're not leaving. This is beyond what Donald Trump says now. They say they have a right to be here. It's their freedom of speech. And if I say the president said everybody has to leave, they said it's our right to stay here. And in fact, George, I actually think the crowd in some cases is building, and it's a more radical part of the Trump supporters. I can see what I believe are probably the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys within the crowd and forming groups. They do have communications still in this area where the security entrance is to the Capitol. They are still demanding to be let in. If you talk to them about what happened inside the Capitol, they blame the Capitol Police for that. And they keep saying this is a peaceful protest. But once again, George, there's really, you can see Capitol Police, I believe, up there, keeping people back. There aren't as many people on the steps, but on the sides of the Capitol, on the north side of the Capitol, and walking around here. These people have no intention of leaving. George?
Okay, Martha, thanks very much. I want to bring in Josh Margolin, one of our national security correspondents. And Josh, one of the big questions we've been dealing with all day is why weren't the Capitol Police, why weren't law enforcement officials better prepared for what's unfolding?
Look, George, honestly, law enforcement has a lot to answer for here. Somebody dropped the ball because we in the civilian world, in the private sector, were well aware of online threats and chatter, as they call it, calling for violence, calling for people to show up. You know, they were saying things that I don't think we want to repeat here about the types of violence they were calling for. But this is weeks. Companies in and around the Capitol had their own intelligence operation telling them to be careful of their people, to be on guard, to take precautions. Law enforcement certainly knew that there was at least a serious threat of violence, even if they didn't necessarily know precisely what was going to go on.
And right now, what is happening now that it has gotten out of control, and we've seen some combat, some law enforcement in combat gear heading to the Capitol. We've seen them deploy on parts of the Capitol step. What is the plan going forward as far as you know?
Well, obviously what's happening now, as we've been reporting, and people on our special report have seen people mobilizing, they're trying to bring in the National Guard, other agencies. But, there's a complex, situation when it comes to law enforcement at Capitol Hill. The police there, it's a small police force. They protect Capitol Hill. They are separate from the FBI, from the D.C. Metro Police. They were doing their jobs. But they were basically by themselves. And now what they're trying to do is bring in the other kinds of police, D.C. Metro, the Secret Service, the National Guard, the Federal Protective Service, that whole universe of law enforcement around the D.C. area. And, we've seen this so many times, especially with the protests and riots that broke out over the summer and in the spring. It's so much harder to put this back together after violence breaks out. Had they had a large-scale force in advance, the argument could be made that they would have been better prepared to protect Capitol Hill and to keep the protesters from breaching the building.
Thank you, Josh Margolin, Pierre Thomas. So they're just going to wait them out, perhaps?
As Josh alluded to, you've got to get the force together. They've got to get all the different agencies together, and they have to come up with a plan. And they have to come up with a plan that they can execute to try to de-escalate if they can, and then be prepared for things to go badly if they do so. This is the part that is striking to people, I'm sure, at home, as the fact that there was not a contingency plan that could be executed faster than this. I'm told they're doing it with all deliberate speed. But again, George, This is as complicated as a situation as we've had in the nation's capital in terms of the Capitol of the United States being breached, thousands of people still remaining on the outside, and mobs of people. Clearly, some of the new images that we saw, not dozens of people, but, multiple dozens of people moving throughout the Capitol. That creates any number of issues, not only in terms of removing the people. Now you have to have a situation where you search each and every office, every nook and cranny of the Capitol to figure out if weapons or booby traps were left. Now, the hope is that most of these people were just angry and frustrated and are sauntering through the Capitol, but they cannot be certain that that's the case, George.
Pierre Thomas, thanks very much. I want to bring in Elizabeth Newman, a former official with the Department of Homeland Security. Picking up on what we were just hearing from Josh and Pierre, Elizabeth, the concern about possible actions by white supremacists and other domestic groups has been out there and building for the last several years.
That's right, George. Even in the Turner Diaries, you see like one of the opening scenes of the white supremacist attempts to bring upon a civil war as an attack on the Capitol. And while what we saw today seems to be mostly organic, clearly there were threat actors in the midst of protesters willing to incite, willing to encourage people to cross lines, and some of those came prepared for a fight. And I think the concern that I have, I'm sure that is first and foremost in the law enforcement officers' minds that are on the scene, is which of these individuals that have breached the Capitol are willing to cross the line to violence. They've already crossed other legal thresholds, but we hope and pray that they don't go further at this point.
Yeah, so what will they have to do? What is the best way for this to be taken on at this point, given the fact that it's such a huge complex, and there's so many people right now on the steps and inside the building?
Well, I think multiple people have already noted that this is a massive failure on the part of the law enforcement agencies, particularly the Capitol Police, who have jurisdiction over Capitol Hill. Another day, another time, we'll do the lessons learned and make sure this never happens again. But it's really difficult now that the breach has occurred. It's going to have to be room by room, very slowly, methodically, and it will require a lot of manpower, which it sounds like they're in the process of regrouping and preparing for that. I mean, the other factor here that would help tremendously is if the president would come out and condemn what is going on and tell everybody to go back home, go back to their hotel rooms. That would help a lot. It would not disperse everybody, but it would at least dwindle some of the numbers, and it would allow law enforcement to be able to get a handle on the situation much faster if we could disperse some of the large crowds that are there. Right. In that video, he told them to go home, but it was wrapped around his false claims that the election was stolen from him. Elizabeth Newman, thank you very much. Let me bring in John Cohen for more on this at this point. You say, as a former law enforcement official, they can't wait.
Yeah, we lost the opportunity situation when the president released the statement where, as you just pointed out, he blended together this idea of going home and the fact that the election was stolen. That's why these people are here. And I would actually argue this wasn't just simply an organic, spontaneous protest. This is the result of weeks and weeks of disinformation being spread by the president, his supporters in Capitol Hill, people who support him in the media, individuals on social media. These people are reacting to the planning that took place in social media and that disinformation. So what do they need to do now? They're going to need to declare this as an unlawful assembly. They need to give people opportunity to clear the grounds peacefully. Then they need to remove people from the building. They need to clear the building. We saw videos of people going into the Capitol with large knapsacks. We've already got reports of explosive devices being located around Washington potentially. They need to make sure there's no explosives in the Capitol. They need to clear the grounds of the Capitol, and then they need to clear the street. And they need to keep people off the streets this evening because, as Pierre pointed out, there's probably a very high likelihood that violence would continue if you have large groups of people in and around the streets of D.C. That's where law enforcement's going to be focusing now.
And that's the question. Will the crowd be diminishing or not? It appears to have been growing over the last couple of hours. John Cohen, thanks very much. Let me bring Chris back. We do have him connected right now. Well, Chris, the president did come out with a statement wrapped in propaganda.
Yeah, George, listen, I think that the statement was a one step forward, two steps back attempt. The president needs to make it unequivocal that these actions by these protesters is absolutely un-American and reprehensible. And there can't be any ambiguity about that. And I think there was a lot of ambiguity in that statement. Listen, I'm glad he did at least what he did. It's better than having done nothing, but it's certainly not what should be expected of a president in this circumstance.
It's hard not to contrast the message saying we love you, you're very special to supporters, that you're right, that the election was stolen, with what the words he had for Black Lives Matter protesters all through this summer, calling for law and order.
Well, George, at the end of it, what you're supposed to do as an elected official in this country who takes a constitutional oath is to always remember that the office you hold is bigger than you. Your responsibility in that office is bigger than you and your own personal interests. And I think that what that video showed was that the president was still placing his personal interests ahead of the interests of the country. And that's what he's been doing for the last 8 weeks, unfortunately. And this is a result. What we're seeing on the air right now is the result of that. And that's what we need to make sure we get back to in this country, is that these offices are a temporary public trust that you hold and hold with honor. And you can never allow your personal interest to overcome the interest that you're elected to serve. And unfortunately, I think the video showed that while the president got, better than saying nothing or just tweeting what he had been tweeting before, it was nowhere near sufficient to send the right kind of message, in my view. That conduct on Capitol Hill is unacceptable. It's un-American. And it has to be renounced in those very clear terms, in addition to saying, go home. At least he said that, but you got to say more.
Chris Christie, thanks very much. I want to go to Martha Raddatz out in the streets of the Capitol. The situation escalating?
It is, George, and it looks like they're starting to clear this crowd a little bit right behind me, north side of the Capitol. We heard 3 flashbangs, which means they're trying to push these people back. They were running very briefly. This is the area, at least on our side of the Capitol, where there has been the most action. This is the area where these people are saying, let me in, let me in. We also heard some glass breaking back there. We obviously don't want to get any closer to that area, but they are starting to move out. There are areas here where some of the Trump supporters have started to leave, but
you got to fight the establishment. Take it to the establishment.
But we have some of these people moving out. Obviously, we don't have all of them moving out, and it's pretty wild up here, George. It really is truly out of control. We have lines of Capitol Police officers up there, but there's virtually no police presence here. And you're starting to get, again, like the Oath Keepers, and I walked by, and they're clearly making plans about something. Asked them if they wanted to go back in, and they said they did not. But I have no idea what they're up to. I don't think law enforcement has any idea what they're up to. We have some helicopters circling overhead. But we also have a curfew here at 6 p.m., and whether they start clearing people out before then or after, there's just no telling.
Martha, we just got a flavor of what you've been dealing with all day. Have you ever felt personally in danger today?
I mean, there's definitely threatening remarks to us. I would say this is a very dangerous situation. And as you know well, George, I've been in a lot of very dangerous situations. But it is so horrible to know we are in America where this is happening, on Capitol Hill. I'm not in Baghdad. I'm not in Kabul. I'm not in a dangerous situation overseas. We are in America. And when I know some people have mentioned this today, when the rest of the world looks at us right now, it is just appalling to think about the fact that we are on Capitol Hill. It's been breached someone shot inside, and all of this chaos right behind me, right in front of me, everywhere I look. And certainly there are people who are threatening us, and it is very different from Trump rallies. I often said at Trump rallies, they turn around and say, we hate you, go home. But then 2 minutes later, they're shaking your hand. This time, you don't feel that vibe at all. It is, they're warning us, they're threatening us, they're telling us we're fake. That's the least of the problem. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about that building and American democracy and what this all says about that today and how out of control this is and how we were not ready for this. And they don't care what Donald Trump just said. They really don't. It is so out of control and chaotic now. I don't know what the president can do, but I think it's going to take law enforcement to get these people out here, not Donald Trump.
An assault like we have never seen in city, everything else.
Yeah, when you talk to people who have worked for President Trump, either in the private sector or now in the public sector, they will tell you the most important quality, it's not smarts, it's not how to work around a business or politics, it's loyalty. And for Donald Trump, loyalty is the most important thing. So he will never trash the people, the Americans who are doing what we never thought would happen, something we never thought we'd witness. He will never trash these people because these people are loyal to him. And that message that he put out, and Martha, rightly reported, will have no effect on what we're seeing right now. The only thing that's going to change what we're seeing right now is once law enforcement, another group the president has touted over and over again, once law enforcement takes control of the situation, and as Martha said, it appears we're still hours from that right now. You could also make the argument that that message itself did more harm than good because at the beginning, as you pointed out, he starts with a lie. And that's what precipitated all this, that the election was stolen, which we know for a fact is not true, which the courts have said is not true. His message is out there. He recorded it. Will it make any difference? Martha Raddatz, who's there speaking to these demonstrators, these protesters, these anarchists, say it will not make a difference. Joe Biden, the president-elect, has spoken as well, calling on the president to do more. What's going to end this is law enforcement, and then after that, the question is, where do we go from here? And I wonder, George, if what we've seen today changes the mind of those Republican senators who are objecting to the Electoral College votes that were coming in today, that were going to be ratified today, that should have been ratified today. I wonder if this changes their sort of calculation when it comes to politics and whatever reasons they had in their head that they wanted to fight this.
Well, let me bring that to Mary Bruce. Thank you, Tom. Mary Bruce, in the members of Congress we've talked to today, the Republicans and the Democrats, there does seem to be some discomfort with what they've seen unfold today. Clear condemnation of the mob from Kevin McCarthy, but they are trying to draw a line between their actions protesting the election and what we're seeing unfold on the Capitol.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of members, especially Republicans, sort of do some twisting here as they try to put some distance between themselves and their calls to object to the results of the election and the actual work that was supposed to be getting done here today and what we are seeing actually unfold in the Capitol. But all of that messaging, of course, gets muddled when the president comes out himself and in trying to urge everyone to go home, in the same breath, repeats these false claims that the election was somehow rigged. It is still very hard for those who are, supporting the president in this effort to try and distance themselves from that message somehow.
Okay, Mary Bruce, thanks very much. The mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, is now speaking. She has imposed a 6 p.m. curfew in the Capitol. Let's listen in.
Press announcement from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. Our regularly scheduled program will resume following the...
4, 3...
Good afternoon. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. I am here at the headquarters of D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department, where we are operating our emergency command center. I'm joined by the district's chief of police, Robert Conti. I'm joined by members of my public safety team. I'm also joined by the Secretary of the Army, Mr. McCartney. This afternoon, I announced a citywide curfew for the District of Columbia beginning at 6 p.m. this evening, going until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. During the curfew, no one is allowed to be outside in public places other than essential workers, which includes credentialed media engaging in essential functions. As you can see from video images, the unlawful behavior inside the United States Capitol building. I continue to urge all Washingtonians to stay home and stay calm. And if you see something, say something. But above all, stay home. The behavior that we are witnessing is shameful, unpatriotic, and above all, it is unlawful. Anyone who has engaged in these activities, continues to engage in these activities, will be held accountable. There will be law and order, and this behavior will not be tolerated. The Metropolitan Police Department has been deployed to assist the United States Capitol Police in restoring order to the Capitol, and our Chief of Police will lead the command to clear the Capitol building and establish a perimeter around the Capitol. I have requested both the Virginia State Police and the Maryland State Police to deploy officers, and they have engaged immediately to deploy officers to the Metropolitan Police Department to help regain control of the United States Capitol. I have also invoked several days ago a standing mutual aid agreement with our surrounding jurisdictions, and I want to thank them for deploying. Those jurisdictions include Arlington County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, as well as Baltimore City. We want to thank them for sending their officers in, assisting us with public safety in the district, as well as the response to the United States Capitol building. Additionally, I want to acknowledge and thank the New Jersey State Police, who will also be assisting the Metropolitan Police Department. So with that, I want to turn to Chief Conti for a situational update. Secretary of the Army will make comments, and we will take brief questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, and thank you, Mayor Bowser. My name is Robert J. Conti III. I am the Chief of Police of the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. As you are aware, demonstrators came to our city this morning to exercise their First Amendment rights and were largely concentrated in the area of the National Mall. Following the President's remarks, a large crowd began to march eastbound on Madison Avenue Northwest and Constitution Avenue Northwest. As the demonstrators approached the United States Capitol grounds, there was a noticeable change in their demeanor. They breached the fencing along the U.S. Capitol grounds and confronted police lines surrounding the building. MPD was requested by the United States Capitol Police to provide assistance with crowd management, and due to the violent behavior towards the police officers there and their intent on gaining access to the Capitol, a riot was declared. It was clear that the crowd was intent on causing harm to our officers by deploying chemical irritants on police to force entry into the United States Capitol building. As you are aware, they were able to gain access to the Capitol building, and I can confirm that one civilian was reported to have sustained a gunshot wound inside of the Capitol. Details of the shooting are not immediately available, and the situation remains under investigation. The Metropolitan Police Department...
There you have it from the Chief of Police. There's confirming that one person was shot inside the Capitol. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser talking about the curfew she's imposed at 6 p.m., setting up a security perimeter now around the Capitol this evening, as well as we see those protesters continuing in the Capitol. I want to talk to Congressman Markwayne Mullin from Oklahoma, who's in the Rayburn House office building right now. I know you've tried to engage with some of the protesters today. What did you learn, Congressman?
Well, I wasn't so much just trying to engage with them. I was trying to keep them from getting shot. When they started breaking the glass out of the chamber, it sounded like shots were fired. Unfortunately, I've heard shots fired before, and that wasn't it. And so I was talking to them because a couple of the people got excited. If you've seen the picture, there's some, obviously Cat Police, rightfully so, had their guns drawn. And so I was telling them, guys, you're going to get shot. You're going to get killed. Is this what you really want to do? And then we just had a conversation to some degree. And there was a couple of them that was reasonable. There was a couple of them that wasn't. There was a couple of them that was just, they were antagonizers, and all they wanted to do was cause problems. And you can't reason with individuals like that. Unfortunately, this doesn't represent America and our democracy. We have a right to protest, but not like this.
Yeah, it's hard to reason once they've broken through all the barricades in the Capitol. Right. And these images coming from inside the House chamber are just stunning right now. From the talks you had with these protesters, do you have any sense of what they want to happen?
Some of the ones that were there, unfortunately, was just looking for a fight. That's what it was. Unfortunately, they were there to antagonize the crowd. That doesn't represent the rest of the crowd, but some of them were, and they antagonized them. They brought them along. But I want to tell you, the Capitol Police there, a lot of them got injured. I went down to their triage center that was in the basement of one of our house office buildings, and I visited with each one of them. And there was numerous there, numerous. If I used the word 25, I'd be underestimating it. And all of them were cut or bruised, had been hit. And that doesn't represent a peaceful demonstration. That doesn't represent what we've seen at Trump rallies or anything else. This was a different group of people, and even I found it interesting when I was visiting with some of the Cap Police. They said that these weren't your supporters. The supporters were fine. The ones that attacked us had evil in their eyes. This was separate from the protests. Even the Capitol Police, these are the guys that were injured. These are the guys that had cuts in their face and had their nose broke and all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately, that person that came through the door, I was right there when they came through the door and when that person got shot. And it's a tragic situation that took place. But it left the officer no other choice. And now that officer, that person that got shot, their life has been forever changed. Obviously, their family's life has been forever changed. But also changes that officer that had to discharge his weapon, because if you ever discharge your weapon the first time, it changes you in some degree. And this stuff should have never happened, George. It's sickening and sad that this took place.
Well, there is no question about that, Congressman. We're glad you're safe right now. You tried to reason with them, even as you saw hate in their eyes as described by the police. It was news to us to learn that many police officers sustained injuries right now. But, in the face of all this, what we heard from the president in the last hour is to these people, we love you, you're very special.
Well, I listen, I wake up every single morning, George, and I say, love the people, love the call. There's a lot of people that get agitated. Politicians are kind of the catch-all when people get upset. And I understand what he's saying. I love them, too. I don't hate them. I do love them. Legitimately, I do love them. But there's a right way and a wrong way to go at it. And everybody that did this the wrong way, they should be punished to the full extent of the law, every one of them. And hopefully we can prosecute them because they should be. But I still respect their ability and their rights, their constitutional rights to protest, but we don't do it this way. This isn't how we handle it.
You don't breach the Capitol. You don't seize the Capitol. Congressman, thank you very much.
Absolutely don't. And it's fortunate that a lot more civilians didn't get shot, because Cap Police showed a great restraint by not doing so. A great restraint. That's where professional law enforcement took place. That's why we need police around us all the time.
Congressman, thanks for your time. Stay safe there in the Capitol today. I want to bring Martha Raddatz back. The police presence around you growing?
It sure is, George. We walked about 100 yards down from the Capitol because we could see lines of police forming. You can see right behind my shoulder there, this side, that side, standing by, forming that perimeter that Mayor Bowser talked about. Again, we're on the north side here, and there are long lines of police officers here. There are long lines of police vehicles the other way, and we are just over an hour from curfew. So it seems certain that they will probably try to clear out this area at some point once we pass that curfew point. We still see people over in the security area who say they want to get inside the Capitol. They are being kept away, but they aren't leaving. Although I would say some of the crowd has cleared out, more of the protester types who I was with down earlier near the White House. They've started to leave, but again, they keep saying they have the right to be here. They keep calling this a peaceful protest, although it's been far from it. George.
Okay, Martha, thanks very much. Let me bring Tony Cardenas in. Congressman Tony Cardenas from California. Where are you, sir, at this point? I know you can't say the exact location. I assume you're in a safe location. Are you still in the Capitol Hill complex?
I'm still in the Capitol complex. I feel safe at the moment, and my prayers go out to all of those officers and all those individuals who are doing everything they can to keep us safe. And I heard what my colleague said. Yes, these officers had shown tremendous and that's the respect that any individual deserves. But when somebody tries to break into the Capitol of the United States of America, that right there is an atrocity, and it's a stain on our history forevermore.
And the question is, where do we go from here at this point? Have you received any indication from leadership on what's going to be happening at the Capitol, how the Capitol...
And cranny to make sure that none of these individuals left anything nefarious that could cause any injury, again, to the staff or the elected officials and all of us who are here to follow through with our duty.
Were you able to engage any of the protesters personally?
No, I was never that close to any of them, and but I know the Capitol Police. I thank them every day that I see them. I look into their eyes, and I know that they're men and women, husbands and wives, and again, I'm praying for them, and I know the kind of hearts that they have. They're tough, and they know how to do their job, but at the same time, they do still restrained, and I'm so glad that unfortunately that many of them have been injured. It just got reported. But I hope and pray that that is at a minimum and that we can move forward as quickly as possible with our democratic process.
Congressman Cardenas, thanks very much for your time. We're seeing video now of members of the protesters, the mob, appearing to smash media equipment right there, as you see the police looking by and perhaps lighting a fire. Rachel Scott has been on the scene during the day. What can you tell us about what you're seeing? Apparently we lost Rachel as we see the standoff there at the Capitol, but we do have Congressman...